great to be with you once again.
Great to be with you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the peace plan that was finally unveiled. Here it is, 181 pages, Peace for Prosperity. What were your first initial reactions when you heard the plan?
Well, sitting in Jerusalem, watching this thing unfold in Washington, President of the United States, Prime Minister of Israel, this was historic. It was dramatic. It's going to be highly controversial. When you dig into the details of the plan, there's a lot for people to hate in multiple directions. But I have to say, the first read, and I have not gotten through 181 pages yet, but it is the most creative, innovative, and I would say compassionate peace plan that I've seen put out. It is both balanced and shows particular compassion for Israeli security fears and Palestinian economic needs. And I think in that way, it was a pretty dramatic rollout, and it's a pretty fascinating plan.
Yeah. You've met with many of the Sunni Arab leaders in the region, and that seemed to be one of the key parts of the plan, is to get them on board. What has been their reaction, and how important are they to this plan?
Well, that's one of the most fascinating parts of this, right, is because almost immediately, Sunni Arab governments throughout the region began putting out statements that were very positive. They weren't saying that they have signed on to every detail or proposal in the deal of the century. However, they see it as positive. They were applauding President Trump. They weren't condemning. They weren't throwing up their hands and saying this is ridiculous. And they were urging the Palestinian leadership to come back to the table and take this plan seriously and negotiate. That's about all that an American administration can ask, except that they got one more thing. They got 3 Arab ambassadors from countries that do not have peace with Israel, Oman, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, to be willing to come to the ceremony and be publicly there. They were even called out by the president, and Netanyahu received thunderous applause. This is dramatic, that 3 Arab ambassadors would be willing to be in the room for a plan that is very supportive of the Israeli positions.
Right. So many of these Arab nations have supported it, but yet on the Palestinian side, even before the plan came out, they rejected it. What do you see going forward with the Palestinians? They even asked Hamas to help thwart this plan.
Well, this is the divide right now, right? It's not that the Arab states have supported the plan. They support the process. They support President Trump re-engaging the Palestinians with several things that the Arab leaders desperately wanted in the plan. That there would be a state for the Palestinians. Now, it's smaller in the Trump plan than any other plan that's ever been offered, but it's there. An element of an East Jerusalem capital. That's interesting because President Trump also said that Israel would be, Jerusalem would be undivided and under Israeli sovereignty. So that's an interesting, how do you mix those two? And of course, there's a $50 billion incentive plan for the Palestinians that the Arab countries are willing to put the investment in. So that's all encouraging. The Palestinians have immediately rejected it. The leadership, it's Mahmoud Abbas. And I have to say, Chris, we're 71 years into the modern state of Israel, and not a single Palestinian leader, of which there's only been 2, has ever been able to say yes to anything. And one begins to ask the question, has God hardened the heart of the Palestinian leadership the way he hardened the heart of the Pharaoh in the book of Exodus? I don't know. Maybe we'll see a dramatic change in the weeks and months ahead. But right now, Mahmoud Abbas's first formal reaction is 1,000 no's.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you really saying? You're saying there's a chance? I don't think that he's saying that.
Yeah. And on the Israeli side, it's pretty complicated too, because already some of the leaders in Judea and Samaria have come out against it. How do you see Israelis reacting to this?
Well, let's start with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Not only has he embraced this plan, he is raving about it. I don't think, as you know, 20 years ago, I worked for him. I have never seen him as effusive about something, certainly a Middle East peace plan that involves a Palestinian state, as this. This is really quite dramatic. So that's number one. The fact that Benny Gantz, the opposition leader, head of Blue and White, Netanyahu's main challenger, was invited to the White House to have his own individual meeting with President Trump. Gantz is first. This means that the White House is treating Gantz as a potential successor, which could not have made Netanyahu that happy, but still, it shows there's bipartisan support for the plan and the process at the top. That being said, the settlers, I've been in touch with a number of them, they're livid. They don't want a Palestinian state under any circumstances, and this could be a huge political problem for Netanyahu. If the settler community, not all of them, but many of them, if they begin to break away from Netanyahu and Likud, they could start moving to the further right-wing parties, Naftali Bennett, the defense minister, and so forth. This could actually bleed out Likud support heading into the March 2nd elections, primarily because of Netanyahu's embrace of this plan. So there are very complicated political cross-currents here in Israel. That being said, overall, I think most Israelis are going to be very, very happy, very, very grateful to President Trump because he's taken our security concerns seriously. He's giving us sovereignty and full military control of the Jordan River Valley, which is so important. He's allowing us to have sovereignty over all of the Jewish settlements, the cities and villages in Judea and Samaria, what the world calls the West Bank. That has never happened. That has never happened in any peace plan. So most Israelis are going to be very happy, but some of the settler community, they want it all, right. And it is biblically all given to Israel scripturally. So that is a fascinating theological and now political tension.
One other group that's really involved and interested in what's happening, and many of them were in the room there at the White House yesterday, is Evangelical Christians. Sure. They've had some input into this as well. Right. How do you see them reacting to this theologically and politically?
Well, that is a good question. I think there's going to be several things. One, overall, broadly speaking, I think most evangelical Christians are going to be very happy. I don't think they're going to read 181 pages, to be honest. I think they're going to be watching the signals. The signal is most evangelical Christians in America appreciate President Trump's support for the defense of Israel, and so he's happy with the plan. They'll say, we're happy with the plan. Netanyahu's happy with the plan, and Netanyahu's chief rival is happy with the plan. It's hard to be more Zionist and pro-Israel than the Israeli government. Not always, but in this case. So I think most evangelicals who aren't going to read the details are going to be like, this seems good. If everybody's happy with it, in Israel, we're happy. Yeah. Now, at the leader level, there will be evangelical leaders who will have some serious problems with a plan that creates a sovereign Palestinian state, demilitarized though it would be, and an East Jerusalem capital. I've been in the room at the White House with very senior, very well-known evangelical leaders who have been adamant in months gone by, do not do this under any circumstances. Will they mobilize against the plan? I don't think so, but you never know.
Yeah. And the scripture many look at is Joel chapter 3. It talks about God judging the nations by dividing his land.
Right. He says, I will judge all the nations that divide my land. This is a plan to divide the land. Now, it's maybe the most creative and compassionate version of that, but nevertheless, it is dividing the land. And it's offering a state to a Palestinian leadership, half of which is controlled by a Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza. The other half is controlled by Mahmoud Abbas, who just began, as you know, his 16th year in power based on his 4-year election. He refuses to have elections. His Palestinian Authority government is riddled with corruption. He has no intention of going anywhere and no intention of making peace. So it's not clear how this plan could actually result in a deal or why it would be wise to really offer something so good from the Palestinian perspective, actually, to people who seem unable to run this well or even want it.
What you do a lot of your writings, Joel, is you encourage people to be praying. A lot of people appreciate that. How would you encourage people right now to be praying for Israelis, Palestinians in this situation?
Sure. Well, I would start with asking for prayer for Prime Minister Netanyahu, obviously for Benny Gantz and for their advisors as we head into an election. We pray that the leadership of Israel, whoever emerges in the next government, look, no major event, there's lots of talk about suddenly imposing Israeli law and sovereignty over the territories of Judea and Samaria right now. That is actually legally not possible when you don't have a functioning government. We need an election, we need a real government, and then we can start sifting these things through. What we need to pray, among other things, is that these would be like the sons of Issachar, as the Bible says, men who understand the times and know what Israel should do. That's a great word for anybody, certainly for the leaders of Israel. So that's the first thing. We do need to pray for the Palestinian people. They are suffering. They are suffering. They're suffering bad economic conditions. They're suffering dashed expectations over 100 years and corrupt leadership that isn't helping them. They are sheep without a shepherd. And that is sad. So we need to be praying for them, certainly praying for Mahmoud Abbas and his family, that they come to Christ and that they soften on some of these things. But I would also add one other thing. I would ask for prayer for the Arab leaders in the rest of the region. I think that this plan really is dead on arrival in Ramallah, the current Palestinian capital. I don't think they're going to look at this or give any credence to this Trump plan. But in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, in Oman, in the United Arab Emirates, they are actively looking at this plan and thinking, if the Palestinians keep rejecting this, are we going to just be okay with that? Or maybe we should start thinking about making peace treaties with Israel and not wait for the Palestinians for another 71 years. I'm praying for that. I've had conversations, as you know, with a lot of these folks. I sense this is a question they're really asking. Should we start moving towards full peace with Israel, even before the Palestinian issue is resolved, the way Egypt did in 1979, the way Jordan did in 1994. And of course, we need to pray that there isn't violence and terrorism as a result of this, which is something that's very possible.
Yeah. And finally, Joel, you have a novel coming out in March, The Jerusalem Assassin.
Right.
And once again, your timing seems to be just spot on, where the whole scenario is about a U.S. president unveiling a peace plan. Right. And here we are just a few weeks before the unveiling of your book, a U.S. president unveiling a peace plan. Well, I know, and the Arab nations coming on board.
So that's another thing to pray for, that my book doesn't come true, because without giving it all away, but March 17th, The Jerusalem Assassin, but it is about an American president. He unveils his peace plan, and a series of senior U.S. officials involved in drafting the plan begin getting assassinated, and sort of the whole thing begins to potentially blow up and unravel. We don't want that to happen with President Trump's plan. I got a phone call from Jason Greenblatt the other day when he was coming through town, one of the architects of the plan. I assured him that this had nothing, I'm not advocating this. I'm not predicting it. And I teased him that maybe he had seen an advance copy and that's why he'd stepped down from the administration. But anyway, he assured me that was not the case. Yeah. But yeah, The Jerusalem Assassin, March 17th.
Okay. Joel, thanks so much for your expertise, insight, and we look forward to the novel.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Chris.